Okay. Looks like it's recording. All right. Welcome to Revolution on a Recliner. Today in the recliner, I have the Pholosopher. Okay. And that is spelled Pholosopher. Not philosopher, the Pholosopher. So, how's it going, Philosopher?
It's philosopher, just like
Philosopher.
the main word. Yeah,
Oh,
it's going good.
just so you know, I struggle with English a little bit. So,
Same.
welcome to Revolution on a Recliner. So, philosopher, it that's not spelled like philosopher, like I said. It's a play on words. Could you explain to the audience what more or less that means?
Sure. So I love pho. I grew up on pho. Both my mom and my dad took me out to eat pho a lot. They made me homemade pho at home, so it's really
What is
close to my heart.
what is that for
Oh,
people?
pho is a Vietnamese, mainly beef noodle soup, and it's really good. There's rice noodles and beef, and then depending on the region of Vietnam, you're eating it from different kind of vegetables like bean sprouts or basil. And it's just really good for the soul, like chicken noodle soup for the soul. There's a pho for the Vietnamese or Chinese immigrant to Vietnam soul. And so that's what pho is. And I love it. And I also love philosophy. So I decided to have my name be the philosopher.
That's pretty cool. I like it. And, I'll have you know that I didn't prepare for this interview the way I prepare for most interviews. Okay.
Okay.
So, most interviews, I read a Wikipedia page of the person I'm interviewing about 15 minutes before we go live. And I jot down like as many questions as I possibly can up until the second that I press record. And that's usually my interview. But for your interview, I actually did some legwork. I put in some sweat and some hard work into this. Yes, I did.
Wow. Okay.
I went
Feel
to
special.
eat. Yeah, well, you should. I went to eat in a full restaurant twice before this interview, just to,
Oh, you had pho twice?
yeah, I had,
Oh, so you went back a second time. Does that mean you liked it?
I loved it. I loved
Oh, yeah.
it. It was really good. At first, I'm not gonna
Right?
lie. At first, when I looked at it, I was like, "Oh my God, what did I just order?"
Yeah, I know. It's different to the standard American palate.
Yeah, and also when I first started to taste, because I love all different types of food. So I'm an experimenter, and so I have eaten almost everything, but I never ate this. And when I started to first eat it, I tasted a lot of what is that, cilantro. And at first, it was like overwhelming. It's like, oh wow, holy cow! But the more you eat it, the more you like. By the time you're done, you want another bowl. It is so good. So thank you for that. Now I'm eating it on a regular
Yay.
basis now. You see what you did?
You're welcome. Introduce more
Yeah,
carbs into your life, for
I
better, for
appreciate it.
worse.
Now, just so you know, I have a background in libertarianism, okay? And I was many, many years ago, I was a leftist, basically, like most people are when they're growing up in their teenage years and young adult years. Eventually, I found conservatism, um, thanks to talk radio. And years later, I discovered libertarianism, okay? So then after that, I was libertarian for a while, and I was involved in the quote unquote liberty movement. I did phone calls for Ron Paul. I worked on a local campaign in Florida and all that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I did some stuff, and I was actively trying to learn it and understand it. And the more I learned, the more I thought it was basically the cure all for all political ills. So, um, but then there was a period of my life, without going into all the gory details, there was a time where I was dealing with my own tragic personal life, and I kind of just sort of forgot about politics. I was kind of consumed with my personal life for years. So I kind of
Hmm.
fell
Yeah.
out for several years. More recently, I'm kind of getting back into following current events. I'm getting back on social media. I'm fighting with people on Twitter every day. But what I find myself involved in now is more the Trump versus the left kind of stuff, the culture war kind of stuff, the identity politics and all that stuff that probably 5, 6 years ago, I wouldn't have been so involved in, because the people that I find myself side by side with now, I probably would have dismissed them as like a bunch of ignorant neocons, whatever, in the height of my libertarian days, so to speak. So here I am, okay? So I got this background in libertarianism, but now I find myself fighting a culture war arm in arm with the conservatives. So I thought it might be beneficial or fun for to bring you on the program and maybe help me bring me back into libertarianism. Does that sound like something you might be interested in or be able to do?
Oh, definitely. I mean,
Okay,
you
great.
mentioned it in your email, and I thought it was interesting. And yeah, we're just looking forward to the conversation.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, I think I need a little help. So let's start with your videos, okay? Because your videos are awesome. Your YouTube channel, it's a series of videos where, I mean, you do a lot of different stuff, but a lot of what you do is you actually try to explain basic libertarian concepts. And I mean, I don't know if libertarian is actually the wrong word, because I'm not, I think I heard you say a bunch of times voluntarious. So maybe we can kind of differentiate between the two later on. But for now, let's just call it libertarianism. So
Okay.
I think the one good video to start at would be a video that I saw that you did that basically speaks on principles. I think you have a few videos that talks about principles.
Yeah.
Why is it so important? What do you mean by principles?
So by principles, in the few videos I've done, it's focusing on what is the philosophy of liberty and what are the ethical principles that somebody who values liberty and freedom amongst fellow humans wants, and what are the things that people should strive to apply consistently. So the principles or ethical principles, why they're important is when you are making an assertion that something is right or wrong, there is always a principle underlying that. And whether or not somebody is morally and ethically consistent is dependent on how consistent they're applying those principles. So, somebody who, for example, says that stealing is wrong, but excuses taxation and says that that's moral and good, has an ethical contradiction and they're not ethically consistent. So, for us, for people to achieve a free society, the framework for a free society is to have a foundation built on top of principles. Because if you don't have principles and your idea of right and wrong is just dependent on how you feel that day, it just depends on what makes you feel good, or it's just the ends that justifies the means, no matter how violent and murderous your means are, you're not going to have a society built on freedom. And you're not going to have a peaceful society. So that's why I focus so much on principles and um, really starting from the ground up of the philosophy of liberty and trying to help people to internalize that and then apply it in their everyday lives, including, personal relationships with coworkers, friends, and family.
Okay. Yeah, and this is something that I've spoken about many years ago when I was doing this whole liberty activism thing. I don't know how to effectively communicate that as well as you just did, but I think that is the one thing that most politics in general is missing is principles. Because even if you look at the agenda of the Democrats, you look at the agenda of the Republicans, it's a hodgepodge of different stuff. There's no consistent thought pattern. It's just different things that they want power to do and different ways they want control over your life. And I've always said this, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I've always said that people always talk about left and right.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that they talk about left and right really has no meaning, because there's no underlying principle attached to that idea, the way that they're expressing it.
Hmm.
It actually is going to be ascribed with an actual meaning. I think the only way it could actually have meaning is if left means more government control and right means less government control. or something along those lines. Okay, maybe there's a better way to express that. But if they think left means minimum wage laws and right means the war against drugs, how would somebody who comes down from another planet be able to decipher, okay, well, why is this one in favor of drug laws and why is this one in favor of minimum wage laws? You know, there's no consistent underlying pattern or way that you can like gauge it so it actually means something. So I agree with you that that's extremely important and it's something that most people don't even consider. So
I think I would actually say that most people consider principles. You know, most people say, yeah, murder is wrong, theft is wrong, slavery is wrong. I mean, you'll be hard pressed to find somebody that you meet that's like, actually, I'm for murder and slavery and theft, because they're like, oh, actually, I'm going to be ostracized if I think that way. And most people just internally, they don't want to be violated. They don't want their property stolen. So just on when they think about it, they want those principles. It's just when it comes to the nature of the state, that's where people have been indoctrinated to not see. They've been indoctrinated to have this abstract view of the state instead of the nature of what the state is, which is a mafia that's funded and based off of extortion. So I would say, too, also, when it comes to politics, even the most statist of Democrats and Republicans, they claim to have principles. So on the Republican side, you have this general idea of principles, and or in the conservative movement as well, of limited government, right? But at the same time, these same people will make an exception when it comes to, you know, the US military being overseas and, you know, bombing people overseas and waging wars and toppling dictators. They think it's justified to spread democracy, quote unquote. But on the surface, when they're campaigning, they always talk about principles. So even the politicians recognize how important principles are. You can also look at socialists and communists. You know, they're like, oh, healthcare is a right, right? And they don't even compromise on their own principles that they say. You know, if they say that society needs to take care of everybody, they're going to follow through that principle till the very end. And that's how they present it to the public as well when they're running.
okay. Well, let me ask you this. Before, when you were explaining your idea of principles and we were discussing that, you said something that some people watching or listening may not be familiar with. You basically, when you were talking about theft, you described taxes. Okay, you talk about taxes as if one was synonymous with the other. But most people, a lot of people may not be familiar with that idea. Like they may not even understood what you meant.
Sure.
So, and you have several videos where you talk about this concept of taxation is death. And of course, me coming from the libertarian circles, it's not like I haven't heard that before, but I know some listeners may not have. Can you talk about that?
Sure.
Like taxation is theft? Like, what do you mean by that? And could you explain a little bit?
Yeah. So the assertion that taxation is theft is based on understanding the nature of taxation. When you are taxed and when the government says that you need to pay up, whether it's income taxes, property taxes, getting, you know, a driver's license or whatever, and renewing your tabs, whatever. These are all forms of taxes. And the only way that the government is funded, unless, you know, you chose a voluntary model, but that would just be private business, is through force and taxation. And if you look at the nature of what happens when somebody refuses to pay taxes, men with guns will come and threaten them with death or imprisonment if they don't pay up. And if they don't want to be carted off to jail and they resist, they will be shot. And that is the nature of extortion. That's what extortion and theft is, when someone takes your property from you by force without your consent.
Well,
So,
some people, if you touch on this, that they'll say, well, what about, I've heard like the social contract and how will the roads be built? And
yeah.
it's a childish fantasy to think that we could accomplish everything that we accomplish as a nation without taxes. How would you reply to them?
Um, well, I mean, there's a few things in there. Who will build the roads? There's the social contract argument. So the social contract argument is just trying to say that, oh, just by virtue of living in the United States of America, that you somehow consented to being ruled, which if you break down, okay, actually you were born, your birth certificate and that actually that your parents signed on your behalf was not you consenting. It was your parents signing you over to the state, basically, and having your social security number created. Um, it starts there. You never consented. There is no contract to speak of. The Constitution itself was written in a time well before we were all born, and the people who signed on to it wasn't all of those Americans at that time either. So the creation of the U.S. federal government was actually from just a minority of people compared to the overall population. So no, I mean, I never consented, and most people alive today didn't consent either to being taxed. So yeah.
So let me ask you this, because I've talked about this a bunch of times with friends of mine who are libertarians, but they're more on the, I don't want to say extreme because that sounds bad, but they're more further along into the philosophy than I am. And quite honestly, they've done more homework than I have. Okay.
Mm.
So maybe that's why. Maybe they just have a better understanding of it than I do. But they talk about, this is something that I've heard you mention, and I'm not 100% sure I even understand what it is, but they talk about voluntarism, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And that, okay, you don't need taxes because people can voluntarily pay for services that they want and not pay for services that they don't want. Now, I'm not going to put this on your shoulders that you're going to explain to me right now in minute detail exactly how all of the system running the federal government and state governments and local governments are going to work, and think that you're going to be able to explain all that to me. That's not my question. But is there a way you can give me kind of an idea of how these things would work compared to the system that we have now?
Okay, so you're talking about building of infrastructure, roads,
Or anything in
dams.
even if you want to pick one thing that taxes do pay for and explain, well, if we didn't do it this way, we would do it that way. I mean, anything, just an idea so people can even understand a basic um, concept of what voluntarism is and how would apply to government.
Okay, so first I'll define voluntarism,
Okay.
and this is something you said earlier that you might want to touch on, so we might as well
Yeah.
touch on it. So I've described myself as a libertarian, a voluntarist, and an anarchist, interchangeably. Basically, the uniting principle for all of those titles is the principle of individual self-ownership. So the idea that every individual human being has the highest claim over their own body and their own life, and that they have the highest rule over and over dictating like what happens with their life and their property. So if someone wants to commit suicide, they're wholly in their right to do so. That is, they hold the keys essentially, and nobody else has that rule over you, which is why we are so against government, because the idea with statism is that it's okay for a group of people to impose their will on you and take away your right of self-rule. So voluntarism is more specifically, though, it has that principle of self-ownership, but the focus is on having the idea that all human interactions, all relationships that you have with another human being, all trade interactions that you have with them should be purely voluntary, and that both individuals in that transaction should consent to it. And so that's what voluntarism is. So when it comes to how things like the roads could be funded, police, things like that, and if you look at the different kinds of statists from all the way to like full-on totalitarian, authoritarian, socialism or communism, down to a minarchist who believes in, as limited a government as possible, but they're saying that we should have taxes to at least fund firefighters, police, and I think it's roads and infrastructure. And then a voluntarist or anarchist is just like, no, nothing needs to be funded, with the threat of a gun, or with the threat of death. There's nothing that cannot be funded through voluntary means and persuasion. So things like roads, if you have a strong respect of property rights, you can have people who own roads and they can charge tolls. You already see this across the United States. Even though state governments collect taxes, they still have tolls on their roads that are supposed to be free and publicly funded, but even state governments realize the problem of having socialized funding. It's not going to be as effective and profitable unless you have direct funding by the people who actually use your roads. So one way of having roads be built and funded is by paying per use, and whoever that owner of the road is can, charge whatever toll they want to. Businesses can also come together and you see this a lot, there's a lot of businesses who are part of the same complex, and there's common things like nice trees, nice fountains, nice, pretty stuff, and the roads as part of that landscape and infrastructure as well, that they can pool their resources and fund a road. Neighborhoods, people who have homes, neighbors can come together and help pave a road. And even if people don't come together, individuals themselves have the incentive to build a road. And if you're, for example, built a home, you will probably build a road so that you can get out of your house. So it can all be voluntarily funded. Now, some people think, though, well, how do you go from government, controlling everything to a voluntary society? How do you even do that? And some people think, is the only way through a violent revolution? And it's no, that's not the only way. What I advocate for is a transition model. So for me, as long as you have government focus on actual actions where there is a victim, actual crimes with property or life, and you have the government focus on those, you get rid of all laws that are against victimless actions, such as smoking marijuana or drinking alcohol, and then also if you end taxation, which is the underlying extortion of the state, then you can transition into anarchy. So
okay,
it doesn't have to be let's tear down everything, kill all the government officials. No, it's not like that. It's if you focus on the principles of self-ownership and property rights, you can have a government transition into voluntarism by just ending taxation and ending all violence by the state against innocent people, and respecting property rights. And that's how you can transition into a much more free society.
okay. Well, it sounds great.
Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that was wonderful. Thank you. Sounds great. I'm going to switch gears for a second.
Sure.
You also talk about in one of your videos collectivism, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And
yes.
So this is something that is it's one of those underlying psychological things that unfortunately we don't even realize we're a victim of, that we frame everything that we think about, everything we talk about, everything that we do in this collectivist mindset, even the words we use, and we don't realize it because we're never taught the idea of individualism, at least not
in public school.
Yeah,
which
not
I
in
went
public
all
school.
12 years.
Exactly, I did too. And so you
makes
have a
sense
video,
that we were both leftists before.
You see, there you go.
Public
Absolutely.
school, yeah, at least in our generation, the past several generations have been infiltrated by the socialists.
Well, yeah, and that's actually my next two questions. So the first question is you have a video that says the 3 ways to free your mind from collectivist psychology. Now, you did that video a few years ago, so I apologize if you don't remember all three. But if you could just, and I didn't prep you before, but if you could just kind of speak on that a little bit.
Sure. So I know, yeah, and I always do these three ways. It's like, the short internet style videos.
Sure, absolutely.
There's always more than three ways, but I try to find the main ones. So I might be missing some, but the main ones is like avoiding talking and thinking in terms of like we or as a group. Focus on the reality of who's doing what actions, and when it comes to yourself, thinking in a way and being clear that, okay, if I say I believe this, I'm talking about myself. And to not say, okay, don't mistake and say, okay, we believe and we want this, especially if you don't know, if you're just generalizing. Because that's a way to get rid of your individuality and your own responsibility for what you believe.
Yeah, and we do a lot of this stuff without even realizing that we're doing it. Like I was doing a podcast a couple months ago, and there's a woman who does the podcast with me pretty often. Her name is Wendy Bellevue, and we were discussing. The podcast was actually because I posted something on Twitter about identity politics, and it was a Twitter poll, and the Twitter poll basically said, it was a question. It said, is it a crime to be white? And so that was also the basis for the podcast. That was the entire podcast idea and the theme. So we were kicking around a lot of ideas.
Oh gosh.
Yes. So we're kicking around a lot of stuff based on identity politics, and also this culture war that's happening between the left and the right and Trump and all this kind of stuff. So, I mean, it's all over the place. You can't get away from it. So, and I'm kind of wrapped up in it. I'm not going to lie. I'm probably a little too wrapped up in it. But so we were discussing that. And then I was talking about a movie that I watched called White People. Okay. It was a documentary. And part of the documentary was they visited an all Native American school. Okay. And they discussed what they did with these kids in the school. They asked them to do a kind of a word association. And they asked them to associate, one of the words that they wanted to associate stuff was white or whiteness. And everything that they associated with that was bad. So I asked the people, so I asked the people that were doing the podcast with me, and I said, listen, let's be honest. I don't know that we don't deserve that, because we did a lot of bad stuff to the Native Americans.
Well, and there you go, what you're saying.
Exactly.
We did this. It's but wait, did you as an individual do those actions? So, one of the things, right. One of the things is avoiding saying we when it comes to actions that you had nothing to do with, whether good or bad. Or bad. Like, it'd be really weird for me to be like, for example, talking about the Hong Kong umbrella protests, and then me being like, we stood up to them. I don't even live there. I did nothing. And even if I lived there, if I wasn't part of the protest, I didn't do shit. And if I was part of the protest, to say we fended them off is, you can say that as a sort of like literary thing, like, okay, look, if you're really part of that group, but it's a lot better to be specific as to what your individual actions were,
Yeah. And the funny thing is, here I am, a white guy, and I'm basically taking the blame for what, quote unquote, we did to the Native Americans. And Wendy, the girl who does the podcast with me, she's black, and she almost beat me up over the airwaves, over the internet, trying to knock some sense into me and saying, listen to what you're saying. Why are you saying we?
Right, and taking responsibility for something you had nothing to do.
Why are you doing that? Unless you have a time machine, you couldn't have had anything to do with that. And she starts yelling at me, and I was like, you know what? She's right. I didn't even realize I was doing that. So it's something that we do and we're not even aware of. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, and it's also something that is imbued in you, especially if you go through public school. But even if you don't go through public school, just being exposed to, movies, mainstream movies, television shows, there's a lot of collectivist rhetoric in there. You know, stand for your country. It's our country. It's us versus them. It's collectivizing all Americans as if they just have one collective united will, which, as you know, from being in politics in any manner, at any level, you'll see that there's a myriad of opinions in America.
Sure,
there's
absolutely.
no one American mindset.
Just within libertarian circles, you can't find two libertarians that agree with each other. So
it's very rare.
Yeah.
But then usually there's something subjective that you don't agree on, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, so, you know, it's very easy to fall into that. And, you know, humans as a whole have been passed down a history of collectivism. Whether it's associating and feeling kinship with people just because they look similar to you, because of race, and just forming groups on that, it's really easy to. And I think, you know, beyond the propaganda indoctrination, it's also just kind of like a natural instinct to feel like connected with people who look like you, from the same place, have a similar culture. But it's just important to not what's the word? Like erase the individual from the picture and forget that there's, you know, that whatever group you're referring to is made up of individuals.
Sure. I love what Ayn Rand said, where she goes, and I hope I'm not butchering this quote, something like, the smallest minority in the world is the individual.
Yeah, that's exactly
it. Yeah, I love that. So, but to expand upon that a little bit, let me ask you, so is it wrong? Because I'm trying to put this into practical use, everyday use. Is it wrong to, it is kind of a collectivist idea to be patriotic about your country and that kind of thing. Is that wrong? Or
depends on your definition. So what do you mean by patriotic for your country? Like, what does that?
Well, I know that could mean, I know that could mean a lot of different things. To us, it would mean the love for what we would probably think were the founding principles of this country, and the kind of seeds of libertarianism that the forefathers planted, you know, for us so many years ago. That's probably what to libertarians it would mean.
Okay, but, so you feel proud of that culture, the founding of America.
But I'm not gonna lie, and I hope you're not gonna want to hang up on me when I say this, but I even said, I don't know if you're familiar with Tom Mullen. He's kind of a he's a libertarian writer and political commentator. And I had him on the podcast a few months back, and I told him, I said, Tom, am I wrong if I'm at a football game and I'm standing there with my double-barreled beer helmet, okay, and they're playing?
I don't know why I can see you doing that.
Trust me, no, you have no idea.
Okay,
and
they're rooting for your team.
Yeah, they're playing this
just because we came from the same state. Like, that's my team.
Yeah, and they're playing.
I don't think there's something ethically wrong with that.
Okay.
I don't think there's something ethically wrong with just feeling like you have a kinship, that you want to maintain the idea of freedom and individual liberty that, yes, the founding fathers, not all of them, but a lot of them were the libertarians of their day. They were the radicals of their day, and sure, they formed a federal government, but in terms of the history and compared to everywhere else in the world, they were radical libertarians. And I personally, you know, when I read about stories of the American Revolution, reading pamphlets about being against taxation, I feel like I can't help but feel love, you know, and passion for that, and appreciation for those people who spent their time and their life energy trying to spread liberty in the way that they could articulate. And in the best way that they understood liberty at the time. So patriotism, though, the definition is love for one's country. So the thing with that is, while I don't think it's like an ethical wrong, because you're not advocating for violence in and of itself by being a patriot, by saying you're a patriot. To me, I just don't say that I have a love for my country, because if you break down, well, what are you talking about by country? Are you talking about the government? Are you talking about all the land in the United States? Are you talking about all the people? It just depends. For me, I feel patriotic. Well, I don't feel patriotic. I think the more accurate word is I feel love for my fellow humans. It's not restricted by the landmass of the United States. I feel love for any human being who just wants peace and love in their life and happiness. I just feel that fellow empathy and kinship for that. So I don't think it's an ethical wrong to say you're a patriot, but philosophically, I don't think it's accurate. And when you are talking to someone about what you believe, and especially if you're trying to, spread that love for liberty to them, it's a good idea to just be specific in your language about what you feel. So that's all. It's more from a practical philosophical standpoint that I don't say I'm a patriot.
I understand every word you just said.
But I get the sentiment.
It all made 100% logical sense. But every time I hear Ray Charles sing America the Beautiful, I can't help but get choked up. Or James Brown singing Living in America. I cannot. I mean, I'm ready to stand up and salute whatever you ask me to salute at that point. Okay. So I don't know.
You got to do some soul searching on, and it's not going to, your answer for why you feel those strong emotions is not going to be the same as mine. Okay. Or there may be overlaps. It just depends. Like, are you attracted to the idea of freedom? What is that song? It's like, I had it recently come in my head, and, I went to public school, so I heard and had to sing all of these, very patriotic American songs.
Okay.
I think it was like America the Beautiful. It's like America.
Yeah, that's the one that Ray Charles sings. That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay.
I get such goosebumps when I hear that song. And I understand the danger of blind patriotism, nationalism, of all this groupthink. I completely get it. But I
think what you're alluding to is blind as in without principles.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean that's the core of it. For me, I feel emotional too, like hearing those songs, because the underlying emotion is this desire for peace and love and prosperity.
So whoa, back up a second. So hold on. So you're saying that you don't hate America?
What? See, America is so abstract, the idea. Yeah, that's funny. Definitely get that as a libertarian,
Yeah.
Oh, you must hate America just because you want people to be free. Wait, what?
Yeah. So you touched on when we were talking about the 3 ways to free your mind of collectivism. You also touched on something that maybe we could touch on real briefly. You also have another video, and everybody again needs to go check out your channel because there's a lot of really cool stuff. But you have another video that says that's titled "The 5 Ways Public School Brainwashes Children." Now, again, I know you did this video like 2-3 years ago. I'm not asking you to go through it point by point, but if you could just give me a brief idea. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely check out the video if you want the specific breakdown. But in general, it's just going into how public schools create this mindset of collectivism. Like, one way they do that is by separating students based off of age groups instead of based on merit or whatever their skill set is. So that, that's one way. They erode the idea of the individual. They have competitions between the schools where it's like, oh, it's, the tornadoes versus the whatever hurricanes or whatever the, mascot is. And that's where you start that collectivist mindset that whatever accomplishments your schools go through, even if you're not on the debate team, you're not on the math team, you're not on the volleyball team, whatever team won, but you should feel somehow that you were a part of it. So that's one way. But just in general, like, public school is not focused on you as an individual. The whole premise of public school is the teacher dictating to you what you need to learn today, what homework you need to do when you get home, therefore dictating what you do when you get home, and then shaming you if you don't do what the teacher says. You can't read the books that you want to. You have to read whatever's assigned to you. I mean, of course you can read it, but you need to get your homework done anyway. So whatever little time you have left after your full-time school job, where you technically work overtime.
It's very robotic, very mechanical, and I don't think it actually challenges their brain as much as it needs to be challenged, so much as it just forces them to memorize useless shit.
Yeah. So, you will have instances where there are some teachers who try to teach that, but the overall structure of the compulsory education model, which is not exclusive to public schools, there are private schools who also have separating by ages, teachers dictating what the curriculum is, not allowing students the freedom to pursue their interests. This whole model is about the idea that you as an individual don't know what's good for you. You as an individual don't have the ability to, by yourself, determine what you want to do in life for yourself. You must be told by other people what you need to learn. So it's very central and authoritarian.
One thing that you also touched on, which kind of goes along with what we were just saying before, is in the video you mentioned the Pledge of Allegiance, and that is something that drives me insane. That's where, even despite everything I just
even
said
though we were just talking about patriotism,
I was just explaining to you how I get goosebumps whenever I hear those songs and all that kind of stuff. But the Pledge of Allegiance to me is such a glaring example of fascism and robotic thinking and just the wrong...
And brainwashing.
Brainwashing, exactly.
These kids to, before they have critical thinking, and public school definitely doesn't teach critical thinking. They don't want you to. Because then you'd be like, wait, so how do you know that businesses are bad and governments need to regulate? Wait a minute. Like, you're not going to... someone who wants to control children is not going to teach those children they want to control how to think for themselves.
Yeah.
So.
And I posted a picture because I don't know if you know. I'm sure you're aware. If I know it, I'm sure you know it. So back when the Pledge of Allegiance first started, it was started by a guy who was basically a flag salesperson, and the original salute.
Francis Bellamy?
Yeah, Bellamy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the guy was selling flags, okay? And he convinced the entire country to buy these flags to salute, okay? Yeah. So he was an awesome salesperson, by the way. And
clearly.
Clearly.
He did have the government's monopoly on violence to aid him,
Exactly. Yeah, the guy was badass, no doubt about it. I'm in sales. I wish I could have done what he did, okay? So but the other thing is, the very first salute that they used to salute was the Heil Hitler sign. Yeah, the Nazi salute. Mm-hmm. And I posted a picture, and this is like a side story. So I'm going off into left field here, but just a little interesting side note. I posted a picture of that on Instagram, but with an explanation that this was the original salute to the American flag, and this is one of the reasons why people need to question, why are kids forced to do this on a daily basis, blah, 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 blah. They took it off because they said that I violated their user agreement or whatever it is. So they took it off thinking that I was, I guess, posting pro-neo-Nazi material. And it was an explanation against fascism, So that pissed me off so bad. I was pissed. I sent an email to them, and I don't even know how I still have an Instagram account, but that's besides the point. Yeah. So, I agree with you 1,000%. And speaking on the Pledge of Allegiance, I mean, why do they do that? What is the reason for that? Why do they do it at every goddamn sports event, too? I never understood that.
Yeah, it's to create the idea and blind allegiance to authority. and just blind. You're literally saying, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, which implies the government, just the ruling structure over all of Americans. So it's not about I pledge to not be violent. I pledge to pursue liberty and truth. It's nothing like that. It's just pledge your life to this abstract idea called the U.S. federal government. And they, the thing that they say is just do it to the flag, but the implication is to pledge your life to the state. And this started in the early 1900s. Francis Bellamy, when he was going around selling it to the government and trying to have them put it through all the schools. The origination was, I'm pretty sure, and I could be wrong, so people should definitely look it up, the history of the Pledge of Allegiance. But I believe it came from the Prussian schooling model of how do you create people who are obedient to the state, and in Prussia, who are willing to die for you, for this idea of the state. So the reason they do that at every sporting event, at the Super Bowl, is just to reinforce this idea that you as an individual don't matter, alone. That you need to be part of this whole collective idea of the state, and that you are part of everything. So.
And the worst part of it is people, the average American, don't realize that it goes against everything that the flag was supposed to stand for, that the country was supposed to stand for. Individualism, liberty, self-sovereignty, and all that. It goes completely against. Now, if they want to play the Star Spangled Banner, and I still think it's stupid that they play it at every damn sporting event. I think that's silly. But if they want to play it like championship games, the Super Bowl, and all that kind of stuff, I have absolutely no problem with that, and I will sing it, and I will get choked up every single time. But I refuse to salute the flag because I don't think it's the same thing. I think when you hear that song, if you can ignore the words, because the words talk about war and all that, and I know that's not what we're supposed to stand for either. But when most people hear the song, they don't think of war. They think of, bravery. They think of America being bold.
They think of, well, for me, I think of fighting off tyranny. And
exactly.
All these men and women united, a lot of them were just voluntary militia people. They just grab their private guns and they're like, I'm going to fight, fuck the British.
But I don't get that from the Pledge of Allegiance. That's completely different.
No, that's
I don't get
different.
any of that from the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah.
But people don't realize that it's two competing different ideas. So I hate the Pledge of Allegiance. I really do. It pisses me off. It really does. So anyway, so there's that. So all right, moving right along.
It also says one nation under God, but the one nation part, it's like the synecdoche is just saying, this whole nation of what is it now, 300 million Americans currently. They're just one nation of people. Like it's just another way to collectivize and say, oh, you should feel like some sort of attachment to this idea of, us ruling over you as a whole. So.
Yeah, and people just don't think. They're just sheeple. They just don't think. They don't question. They just go along with whatever they're told. Yeah. Well, not everybody, obviously.
Right.
Obviously. But okay. So you had another video, and I watched this video, right? So I'm watching.
I think you'll be saying that for a while. You had another.
Yeah, you had this other video, right? Yeah. So in this video, okay, you're sitting in your apartment, right? And you open up your absentee ballot letter.
Yeah.
All right. So you open the letter. And you see the choices are Hillary and Trump.
Right.
You threw it in the fucking garbage.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that was during.
You didn't vote for Trump, I guess, then, or Hillary.
No, I didn't. I wrote in Ron Paul.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you've seen, even though Trump won, and I actually felt relieved when Trump won, because with Hillary, no. You know,
Yeah.
she was Secretary of State for Obama. You knew that she was a neocon for sure, has a huge history of it. Husband to Clinton. And you learn about the Clinton crime cartel. I mean, you know that she's this evil, corrupt lady willing to kill people who want to expose information about her crimes and those of her husbands. So I felt
So
that,
so
yeah.
at what point did you come to the idea, did you come to the realization that you hated women?
What? Oh, I see what you're doing. Uh, I didn't. It's
Oh,
because I love women that I don't stand for and want to, you know, advocate for somebody who is a tyrant. So,
okay. All
so
right.
yeah,
So you don't hate women, you just don't like them. I get it.
right. Just
So,
because Hillary has a pussy doesn't mean that she represents all women and all women's whales. So,
okay. So you're not a Trump, you're not a Trumpian then.
no, in that, I mean, there's some things that he said. I love how he was able to call out fake news from CNN, MSNBC, and how they just like, um, would just find any sort of thing that they could find about him from, I think it was like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, saying like, yeah, I'd grab that model by the pussy. They let you do anything you want. Like, just finding some old ass tape and trying to be like, oh, this is, why he's so bad.
And
Like
he don't
I
give a shit. He don't
appreciated that.
care.
Yeah, I appreciated that, and I also appreciated the alt-right movement that arose to as a reaction to the egalitarian left, specifically those who say, hierarchy doesn't exist. Everyone is completely equal in terms of strength and merit and everything like that. So they were a reaction to that and to the corrupt establishment trying to gain power through Hillary Clinton. So I appreciated that, but at the same time, I noticed that Trump, he didn't have any particular principles.
No.
And he'd been in political spheres for the past 20 years. A big part of his success was funding politicians, getting, like getting tax exempt, being able to build his hotels and places and making deals with those local politicians. He's had a huge history of funding both Republicans and Democrats. So for me, what I saw is somebody who doesn't have principles, but is very good at creating relationships socially, and was very successful with the Celebrity Apprentice and stuff like that. But I just recognized he was very charismatic, but he wasn't principled. He didn't have any articulation of individual liberty. So yeah. So
Yeah, I'm with you. I didn't vote for him. I didn't support him. I'll never say never, but it would be very difficult for me to vote for him in the
yeah.
next coming election because, I mean, he doesn't stand for anything I believe in for the most part as far as actual policies and that
Oh,
kind of
well,
thing.
like you saw, he banned bump stocks.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
he said ban the guns, due process later.
yeah.
He's for red flag gun laws.
He's
He's
all
not a
over the
second.
place.
Yeah, he's just another politician. And what I predicted and what came true is just there's going to be more spending. The debt's not going to go down. The deficit is going to increase. There's going to be more wars. And there you go. And more restrictions on our liberties.
But
And
I can't lie. I have never enjoyed a presidency more in my life because I adore his Twitter account. I love it. I love the fact
some
that
things he says for sure.
yeah, I love the fact that
He has a good social media team.
I've learned to just dismiss his ideas because a lot of them are just ignorant. But I just love the fact that, and I know I shouldn't focus on this, and maybe that's half the reason why I need more people like you on the podcast is because I need to stop focusing so much on the culture war and get back into the principles and the libertarianism and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
But I'm
yeah.
knee deep in it. I'm in there. I'm in the war. I'm fighting the culture war on Twitter and Facebook every day.
Yeah,
And
and it's totally understandable to get really wrapped up in that and in Trump's, cult of personality. He's very charismatic and he's been assertive, and when he's assertive about things that you actually care about, like when he was running saying that, oh, we're the ones who the US federal government is the one that created ISIS from, giving arms to the rebels, arming the rebels and intervening. It was good stuff, and it was cool that he could, to one CNN reporter be like, "You're fake news. I'm not talking to you." Like
I love that.
it's like really
I eat that
satisfying
up.
to see, because did you
Yeah.
ever see that in a president before?
No.
So it was really cool, and it was like, oh gosh, like you felt like this idea that, and this hope that, oh, what if he really could drain the swamp and really fight for liberty? But what you found was, and what I think is true, is there's definitely people in the swamp that he hates and that hates him for whatever reason. I saw this come out he did a charity event with Hillary Clinton when they were both running. It was during their run in 2016. And you could see like all the people in the background who, this was in like Manhattan or something, from like, I think a lot of them were like Catholic priests. You saw some Masons based on their jewelry and stuff like that. A lot of people, while Trump was talking, like just gave him glares. And one thing he said that stood out to me was, he's like, I was campaigning, or he's like, I've met a lot of you. We used to have parties. And he's like, and all of you told me I couldn't do it, but I did it. So what that showed me was he had people in the political establishment that he knew that just didn't like him for whatever reason. And he was running to show them, I mean, not the only reason he was running, but one of his motivations was to show them that, he could do it, that he could win. And that there are people in the swamp that he definitely doesn't like, but in terms of what he supports, he just wanted to fill the swamp with his own people.
No, I get that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think that Trump is going to do anything good, any real good, like ground shaking, like he's going to shed the shackles of tyranny from us and we're going to all of a sudden live in this libertarian paradise, because he's not even a libertarian. So I don't think he's going to do anything in that regard. He's going to do a lot of bad stuff, but they're all going to do bad stuff. The one thing that I think he's going to be known for, and the one gift he's going to give to us, is simply the fact that he's a bull in a china shop, and he slapped the piss out of CNN for 4 years, maybe 8 years, and I think that's a great thing. He circumvented the media by going to Twitter and knocked them down a notch. And believe it or not, I almost think that's more important than what he could do in the White House as far as policy. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but
well, I think what you're alluding to is the culture movement that he is helping to fuel is what will, you're saying, outlast any policy changes he may make.
Well, not just the culture movement, but also the fact that I think that he actually helped knock them down a notch as far as people trusting the mainstream media.
Yeah. He helped to get people to really question the mainstream and to question what they're being fed. I think that that's great. And so I'd actually agree in that sense that in terms of the culture of criticizing what you're being fed and to think critically is very important. And when it comes to running, and if there are any libertarians that want to run, they should definitely study his presidency and also his campaign for the presidency for any, social cues that you could pick up. Because he was really good at being assertive and just sticking to what he was saying and, not backing down. So.
Okay. So I'm going to try not to get completely engulfed in conservatism, or he's not even conservative, let's be honest, but the people that are following him are...
It's hard to put him in a box.
Yeah, but people that are following him, his MAGA people, they are, I guess, the conservative. I guess they're conservatives. Let's say, if you had to label them, whatever.
There's
So
some mix. Yeah. There's a lot of libertarians that are for Trump as well.
I'm
they're just
sort
attracted to his charisma and his power and his richness.
I'm sort of in that box too. I'm more attracted to his insanity. That's what I'm attracted to, as far as his unorthodox way of doing things, and the fact that he beats up some people that really need to be beat up. But and I figure like this: any president that we would have gotten would have been terrible regardless. So at least we have 8 years of entertainment. You know what I mean? So that's the bright side as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. So we'll see how it goes. I still don't know that I can vote for him, but whatever. Either way, I'm going to enjoy it. So one last question. Now, besides your YouTube channel, you're also on Twitter, and you're also are you on Facebook as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
That's my biggest following right now. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know. Okay. So definitely got to follow you on Facebook, but you're also on Instagram. Okay.
Yeah.
And you post a lot of really cool stuff. A lot of the stuff is funny. You know, you have a sense of humor and it's funny. It's also informative. Now, you posted something that was very thought provoking. Okay, recently, and it's timely as well. Okay, so it was a pic of AOC from what is her name, Alexandria, whatever.
Ocasio-Cortez.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Okay, I struggle a little bit with names. So besides the English language, so it was from her famous rooftop dancing video. You know, the one that went viral.
For Breakfast Club song.
Yeah, exactly. But in this pic,
I didn't make that meme, by the way. I saw it. I thought it was hilarious.
Okay. But you commented on it. Okay. So in this pic, she's dancing, right? And she has what appears to be 2 bowling balls under her shirt.
Well, that was photoshopped. I mean,
okay. So
her boobies naturally are. I mean, they're a decent size, so I think they gotta be C cups or something. But someone made them like E or F bags. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. So
and her hands resting on the right boob. Like what?
Yeah. So she has these. I still don't really understand why, but whatever. It's definitely an eye catcher. Okay. So she has these Jagunda Gazungas. Okay, right? And under the pic of her, there's a photo of Thomas Sowell, right?
Yeah. So with a smile too.
Yeah, with a smile. And he says something. Okay, there's a quote from him, and it's honestly a quote that could only come. Yes, a quote unquote okay.
Yes.
So that
exactly. Not a real quote.
That could all.
Although I wish it was a real quote.
That could only come from a man of his astonishing brilliance. And it says, quote unquote, don't be fooled by big old socialist titties. They're meant to hypnotize, then enslave your ass.
So, I know, I read it like that too. That's hilarious. That's why I reshared it. I just thought it was hilarious.
So,
I mean, obviously, it's not the titties that are enchanting you, but the underlying sentiment is beware of the socialist rhetoric of we'll take care of you, everything will be great under us if you sacrifice your property rights and steal from others. Because it's actually undercover to enslave you.
Okay. So that's what I was going to ask.
Titties, yeah. The way, you know.
Now, it took me about 15 minutes of looking at the picture before I even realized that Thomas Sowell was underneath her picture. But once I saw that
looking at her big old socialist titties, I'm glad you didn't get enchanted.
So once I saw that he was there, I read his quote, and I was like, okay, so that's deep, man. I better ask the philosopher, however you say it. I better ask her what
philosopher.
Philosopher.
Philosopher, the regular word.
I better ask her what that means, because I don't think that I can figure that one out. That's deep. So, okay. So now I have a better understanding, and I appreciate that. I appreciate all your help today. It's been wonderful. I hope we can do this again, because I'm going to need more instruction, okay, to get me back into the libertarian fold. So, but before I let you go, do me a favor and let everybody know where they can follow the philosopher.
Sure. Okay. So If you want to follow me on any of the social media platforms that you're on, even Minds or Steemit, just head over to my website. It's thepholosopher.com, spelled like philosopher, but with PHO in the beginning instead of PHI. And that's where you'll find links to all my social media pages.
Beautiful. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. It was a pleasure, and we definitely need to do this again sometime soon.
No problem. Thanks, John.
All right. Take care.
Take care.